Everybody, welcome to the Rural Women New Zealand webinar, Ovarian Cancer Let's Talk. We came up with the name because of the Let's Talk Peach campaign. You can hear somebody in the background, and that's just one of the staff supporting a member to log into the system. So thank you very much for taking time out to come and listen to us today. With us today is Gill Naylor, the President of Rural Women New Zealand. We have Jane Ludemann from Cure Our Ovarian Cancer. We have Tash Crosby from It's Time to Talk Peach. And we have Pauline Blomfield from Canine Medical Detection. So welcome everybody, and welcome to those who have logged in. And Gill, I'll leave it with you.
Okay, thanks Angela, Cure, thank you for joining us today. Rural Women New Zealand is a charitable organisation focusing on those in rural communities in Aotearoa New Zealand, particularly women, children and families. Our purpose is strengthening, supporting and connecting rural people and communities. Ovarian cancer is a nearly invisible health crisis in New Zealand. There is little awareness and not much research or information available, and the government and not-for-profit funding is almost non-existent. To this end, following remits at our AGM in November last year, Rural Women New Zealand's national project for this year is around ovarian cancer. We aim to raise both funding for and awareness of the symptoms and the disease itself, as well as for an exciting new potential tool in diagnosis. We're proud to be collaborating with the charities Cure Our Ovarian Cancer and Talkpeach to raise awareness and funds to support their work. We're also excited to be fundraising to support Canine Medical Detection in their aim to develop canine detection of ovarian cancer through urine samples. This webinar is the first of what we hope is a number of initiatives that will be rolled out during the year. Our members will be raising funds as well as awareness at a local level, so please watch out for anything happening in your area. Ovarian cancer is one of the 5 gynecological cancers, none of which gets much airtime and little to no screening. Women need to have the knowledge so that they can have more effective conversations with their doctor and push to be tested. In New Zealand, women with ovarian cancer have to go back to their doctors on average 4 times before they receive a blood test and an ultrasound to investigate the causes of their symptoms. And survival rates are worse than what they were for breast cancer in the 1980s. It's pretty scary stuff, in which coincidentally is the decade that most of the treatments are from. A recent report from the Cancer Control Agency listed ovarian cancer as one of the least researched cancers in New Zealand. Cure Our Ovarian Cancer and Talkpeach are leading a petition to Parliament to call for government action. If you do one thing today, please sign this petition and share it. The link will be in the chat section on this webinar. We're also very proud to be collaborating with Canine Medical Detection New Zealand. This is a charitable organisation that now has a proven track record for canine detection of prostate and bowel cancer through urine samples, with ovarian cancer next on their radar. Funding is required to set up the training and testing facilities, along with training a dog to detect the scent markers for ovarian cancer in urine samples. Enjoy the webinar, and from this, let's support each other to build awareness in our communities, connect with the health professionals and the government to seek their understanding of the need for better diagnoses, and raise much needed funds for research. Thank you. Enjoy the next hour. I'll hand you back to Angela.
Kia ora, thanks Jill. So Jane Ludemann is here from Cure Our Ovarian Cancer. Jane, the floor is yours.
Oh, brilliant. I'll just, how do I go from the start? Thank you. So it's an honour to speak to you all today. I'm a country girl at heart. I live in Dunedin now, but I grew up on a sheep and dairy farm, and my husband works for a farm. I even did some research for ag research as a student at university. So I have strong rural connections and an understanding of some of the challenges faced by the rural community. I'm also the founder of Cure Our Ovarian Cancer, which also operates in New Zealand as Ovarian Cancer New Zealand. We're trying to improve women's survival through awareness, advocacy and research. And today I'm going to share some of our specific projects that help rural women. But I'll rewind and explain how I got here. I spent 7 years at university studying science and health. I've worked in public hospitals and private practice, but I'm here because when I was 30, I started to need to go to the toilet more. And I felt tired. And over the next 2 years, I saw my doctor regularly and countless others to be told nothing was wrong, or if it was, it wasn't serious. In retrospect, I had 8 out of 10 of the characteristic symptoms of ovarian cancer, but its name was never mentioned, and not one doctor ordered the simple blood test and ultrasound that could have found it. And so the cancer kept growing, and eventually it caused me so much pain that my doctors could no longer ignore it. I was driving from Wellington to Dunedin to start a new job, and I ended up in Christchurch Hospital having emergency surgery. I woke up to the news that I had ovarian cancer, specifically one called low-grade serous that affects young women and is really hard to treat. A friend was recently diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. It was found during a routine mammogram screening. Her doctors told her, "Good news, we caught it early. We have treatments to cure it. You should have your whole life ahead of you." And I'm really pleased for her. But my doctors, I was diagnosed at the same stage. They told me, "Sorry, it's bad news. It's too late. We don't have treatments to cure it. You likely have 5 to 15 years left to live." It's devastating news, and I've been on constant cancer treatment since. But I want my legacy to be that other women with this cancer don't hear that news, that other women know the symptoms and can get tested quickly so they get diagnosed as early as possible, and for treatments to be found so we can treat it. So what are we doing specifically to help rural women? Well, Cure Ovarian Cancer, through that, I administer an online support group for women who can participate anywhere in the country if they've been diagnosed. And Tash also is a volunteer in that group. As part of our national awareness campaign, we distribute symptoms education to rural communities. So it's really important that women know the symptoms so that they know when to tell their doctor about ovarian cancer. So we send out symptoms posters to all of your doctors to make sure that they can display it on their wall to help women see the symptoms. In addition, we work with oncologists and cancer specialists to develop medical education to help your GPs know and nurses know when to recognise ovarian cancer and do the tests to diagnose it, because whether your doctor's 2 streets away or 30 k's down the road, we want to make sure that every woman understands and knows the essentials about ovarian cancer, and their doctors do too. In addition, we advocate at the government level, and with Talkpeach, we currently have a petition to Parliament. Cure Ovarian Cancer wants to see a national policy to educate women about ovarian cancer when they have their cervical smear, and for national guidelines to ensure women get tested promptly. The national standards are important because they help ensure consistent care regardless of location. In addition, we'd like to see greater funding of clinical trials and an incorporation of telehealth to make participation easier and more accessible to people in rural areas. Our third focus is research, and we're trying to find a cure for an ovarian cancer that kills young women. As part of this, we're funding a laboratory project at the University of Otago to create 3D models to test treatments. And we also raise money overseas to support researchers in places like the US and Canada. But what we'd really like to do this year, what we're trying to do, is bring a clinical trial to New Zealand. There's a new treatment being investigated overseas that seems to work better than anything else available. Medicines are highly regulated, so the only way women can access this treatment is through a clinical trial. We're still in talks, but we think it will cost about $150,000, but we also think that it will make a big difference to a lot of women. And I'm going to share a story to illustrate why this need is so important and urgent. This is Cora. She lives on a farm out of Blenheim. She was 36 years old with an 11-month-old baby when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Over the past 6 years, she's had multiple surgeries and tried every treatment available in New Zealand. And like so many young women, it's not enough. Her cancer is still progressing, and one day, too soon, her beautiful little girl who can't remember mum without cancer won't have a mum, and her farmer husband will be a single dad. A clinical trial could give women like Cora precious time with their families. Cure Our Ovarian Cancer doesn't receive any government support. We rely on donations from individuals and organisations to fund our essential work, and that's why we're so grateful for the support of the Rural Women's Association. Thank you very much.
Oh, lordy, lordy. Thanks so much, Jane. You're awesome. Thank you. Next we have, just a quick reminder, if you've got any questions for any of the panelists, you can pop them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we have a small team here at Rural Women New Zealand head office, and we will, or national office, and we will present them to the panelists at times. So yeah, just feel free to put a question in there. But also I would like to introduce Tash. Tash is with Talkpeach. And you know, interesting, I don't know if you're going to talk about that at all, but I had to look up why we say Talkpeach. But anyway, go for it, Tash. The floor is yours.
Kia ora everyone, ko Tash toko ingoa, and I'm the founder of Talkpeach Gynecological Cancer Foundation. Thank you for having me here today. It's an honour to be able to speak to a lot of you across the country. So I thought I'll quickly talk about my diagnosis and the founding of Talkpeach, some important facts, and I guess sort of our organisation's goals moving forward this year and how you could best support. So I guess sadly, like Jane, the inspiration for Talkpeach came from my own experience. I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2017. I had to really fight for my diagnosis. I took myself to the hospital 4 times. On the 4th time, I had to turn the waterworks on to be sent through for an MRI. And yeah, prior to that, I mean, ovarian cancer would have never crossed my mind when I was having symptoms. So I was sent for the MRI, and I ended up having 2 major surgeries. The first one to remove my right ovary and fallopian tube. And once that was biopsied, I was sent for a second surgery, pretty similar to Jane's, cut from above the vagina up my stomach and everything removed. And then I had 6 months of very intensive chemotherapy, where most women with ovarian cancer have 2 different types of chemo. It's a pretty insidious regime for an incredibly aggressive cancer. So I was thrust into menopause, no longer able to have a family, and the side effects of cancer and chemotherapy will be things like Jane that I deal with for the rest of my life. So I'll move on to Talkpeach and how it started. So it kind of started because when I was diagnosed, there was just very little support. There were no active gynecological charities in New Zealand operating at that time. I was handed a little piece of paper from the Macmillan Trust, which is a charity over in the UK. And it was kind of at that time that I thought, oh shit, I'm never going to be navigating this by myself, you know, and I mean, that was a very isolating and scary kind of time. It was almost like you've got the cancer that you think, oh, well, no one obviously cares about this one. And it was, yeah, maybe it sort of seen as taboo. I know years ago through an interview that I listened to of Jane, I don't know if it was a couple of years ago, but Jane said that, I mean, ovarian cancer even used to be called, people used to call it stomach cancer in public just because they were the taboo around calling it ovarian. So yeah, so being diagnosed with a gynecological cancer is very isolating. There's no one out there doing runs for it. There's no bucket collecting on the street. There's no sports teams in our colours. And yeah, that kind of struck hard with me, really. I work also for the Ministry of Education. So I am an educator, and upon diagnosis, I just researched. And I really, to start this charity, I thought I've learned so much, and I've realized at what a crisis point this country is in terms of ovarian cancer, that was kind of, I guess, the drive to push forward and start it. Yeah, I actually wrote in my speech, it was when I kind of birthed a charity, and I laughed because I obviously don't have a uterus anymore, but I really have nurtured this initiative like it is my child. And yeah, we launched in May of 2019, so we're fairly young. Our mission is to inform New Zealanders on gynecological disease and connect and support those who are diagnosed, to provide education on gynae health, to educate the community on the signs and symptoms, and to provide info and support to all those diagnosed, and also to advocate for better funding into education, awareness, research, clinical trials, and access to medication, and ultimately better pathways to testing as well. We have an amazing educational website, just like Jane does. Ours is www.talkpeach.org.nz. Both of our websites provide a plethora of information, so I do recommend you visiting either of them to learn some more about this disease. Our website has all the info on all the 5 gynecological cancers, their signs, symptoms, treatment options. We have a GP section, tips for visiting your GP, a support section, so things on like hair loss, wigs, and financial support as well. And yeah, I guess I know what is needed in this space because I've lived and breathed it since my diagnosis 4 years ago. And I don't want anyone else to feel the isolation that I felt upon being diagnosed. Yeah, and we have achieved quite a lot since we started. We now fund cancer care workshops. We fund women to get physio. We've featured in pretty much every single woman's magazine, every single breakfast show, and spoken with Jane a number of times at government. We've been keynote speaker at the Women's Leadership Summit, and we have spoken at the DHB Gynae and Nursing conferences last year, and have been invited back to them across the country this year also. And we do educational workshops across workplaces too. And we have also just been signed by a sports team, which is very exciting, a women's sports team, which will get announced in the next few months. So we're the first people to feature on their bibs. I just think that's a huge breakthrough for us. And also we'll be featured on period products, Hello Cup period products, which will be sold at pharmacies nationwide. So I'm going to get into the actual nitty gritty, which are some stats and some key info, which Jane has touched on, but I'll try fill in some other things that we didn't touch on. The statistics are grim. Every year, 1,000 New Zealanders are diagnosed with a gynae cancer, 1 dying every 48 hours from ovarian. Most people have heard of cervical cancer because of the yearly screening program, but as for the other 4 types, there's no screening available, and until very recently, little information. So thank you to Jane also for putting the info out there. The majority of New Zealanders think that their cervical smear will keep them safe, and that it's almost like a warrant of fitness for your gynae health, but in fact, it will not detect any of the other 4 gynae cancers. You could be late stage ovarian, go and get your cervical smear, and it comes back fine, you'll be sent on your way. So it's extremely important, I think, that women know that that isn't a warrant of fitness for your gynae health. Alarmingly, our national gynecological death rate is higher than both melanoma and our road toll, yet the government has committed, I think it's $10 million. Jane, you can fill me in after, but it's millions and millions. It might even be $500 million, but we'll talk facts in a minute. and yet 0 to ovarian, which kills more than gynae, which kills more than the rotol annually. So that's actually just insane to me. Over the last 30 years, I think, Gill, you touched on that, the survival rates have pretty much not changed for ovarian. 30 years ago, breast cancer had a similar outlook. You'll now have an 80% chance 10-year survival for breast cancer, or 92% surviving 10 years if caught by mammogram, which is incredible. But ovarian cancer is hugely underfunded, and there are large gaps in public awareness, and this contributes to the fact that we don't live long enough to form the armies that our breast cancer sisters have done so successfully. And I know Jane as well, acknowledge and applaud the tremendous outcomes that have happened in the fight against breast cancer. And we believe with your guys' help, with similar commitment and resources, that we can do the same for ovarian. 50% of our population need to know how to look after their gynae health, and knowing the signs and symptoms and what to look for are absolutely key in survival, because it's critical you get an early diagnosis, an early stage diagnosis with ovarian. Yeah, I mean, I just guess I was privileged, and I'm just glad that I'm so sassy that I pushed through to be diagnosed. But lots of people aren't, and people can't advocate for themselves and fight for those answers if they're not given the education or even know what to be kind of going to the doctor for. So awareness and education is a huge part of our kaupapa, and I think it's a very important part of what needs to happen. So how can you help? So let's have a look at this. Fundraising, education and awareness, as I said, I think it's monumental to making change. And I know with both Jane and my charities, we need funds to be able to do and make the change that we have planned for our charities over the next year. You know, with breast cancer, people fundraise, they've grown their charity, people are talking about it now. It's so easy to talk about breast cancer and prostate cancer, and that's because the nation's talking. And unless we're out there raising awareness and education, all of those communities don't talk and won't be talking. And without people talking and getting behind it, we won't be able to affect change at a government level. So it really is, I think, a grassroots movement. It starts with the community, and that's how we'll be able to make bigger change in the future. Our strategy and what we're looking to do this year is continue to fund, obviously, physio and cancer care workshops, but our main thing is we want to keep campaigning nationwide with both digital and print campaigns. And we have a support guide, a 200-page support guide that we also need funding for to print, because that's quite an expensive task. It will be the first support guide for ovarian cancer in New Zealand, given out to people who are diagnosed. It will go up to be a digital download on the website, but I think it's important that people have this as a physical guide. We also this year are putting posters in cervical screening rooms that talk about how cervical screening is only just for cervical, and that you need to know the signs and symptoms of the other 4. And then, of course, like any other charity, just to stay afloat, basically, because we can't do the work if, yeah. I mean, I know, like Jane, we have worked so hard. Yeah, I always get teary when I talk about this. But yeah, it's just really hard driving it. Sorry. So I know that we really appreciate everyone getting behind us, because up until recently, we've really felt that almost there's just us screaming into an abyss, when we believe it's a national crisis and everyone needs to get behind it, because our communities in this space are dying because, as of Jane said, lack of funding for this, for research and for awareness. So at this stage, to get us ahead of the game and back up to where we should be around breast and prostate, it's going to take a lot of people and a lot of drive behind us. And I don't want it to sound like it's impossible, because the steps are actually quite simple. It is just about getting voices together and getting loud and making sure the messages are sent and that they're clear messages. But yeah, I just wanted to say that, yeah, we are, I know, and Jane as well, so committed to making change, and we're so driven and so passionate. And we just welcome anyone to help us. and we have all the resources and all the things needed. We just need the manpower behind us, basically. So yeah, I have an amazing fact sheet actually, and it's got all the kind of key points, because it's hard to fit everything into a 7-minute speech. And but it's got all these kind of key points, things that you could copy and paste into social media. And I'm sure Jane could send one through for hers as well, that you guys could just copy and paste. We can send our logos, and it's just good for if you were running an event, you've got that little sheet and you're like, oh yeah, what are the key stats? So, and it's not technical jargon that no one will understand. But yeah, just a really good fact sheet, I think, to keep you informed. Yeah, but whatever you guys are doing, I have an email me, and I'm willing to get behind any kind of initiative that's happening in any way that I can. So yeah, I think that's me for now. But yeah, thank you so much for listening and for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Tash, and thanks so much for sharing your stories, the two of you, Jane and Tash. It's really well, it's challenging, you know, for us to hear from you both. So thank you very much. And now, hopefully, we might have some solutions. And this is from Pauline Blomfield from Canine Medical Detection. And I know, I imagine there's quite a few rural women on this call, on this webinar, and I bet you they have canines in their family and on their farms. And I bet you their noses work quite hard on some occasions for things they probably shouldn't, and some things that they should. So thanks, Pauline. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's wonderful. And yes, as Angela said, I get to talk about dogs, and just to tell you how amazing and how clever they are. So Canine Medical Detection New Zealand, basically it is science and dogs working together. So what we have, it's an alternative to molecular and physical screening techniques, is the use of medical detection dogs. They are a diagnostic tool on 4 legs. So what we do is we train our dogs to identify the volatile organic compounds that are released from tumours. And currently Canine Medical Detection we're training dogs for the early detection of bowel cancer. And using those successful and proven methodologies, we're really excited at the thought of being able to work towards training dogs for early ovarian cancer detection. So the use of dogs as a diagnostic tool is not new. Internationally, medical detection dogs are not new, and their success is well documented. Training results, what happens is that they're recorded and analysed by their sensitivity and specificity. And for those that are not familiar with these terms, basically what that means is sensitivity is to correctly identify those with a disease, and that's your positive. And specificity means to correctly identify those without a disease, and that's our negatives. And one quite relevant example of this is that there was a Swedish study reported successful canine detection of ovarian in tissue and blood samples with a sensitivity of 97% success and specificity of 99% success. But to understand just how dogs are able to detect odours with such accuracy, you do need to understand dogs just a little. So dogs have what we call scent receptors. And as an example, German Shepherds have 225 million scent receptors compared to us mere humans who have only 5 million. So I'm sure you've all heard about the diabetic alert dogs. And what happens here is isoprene, it's a natural chemical in our body. And when our blood sugar level drops critically, our isoprene levels rise. And it's this that dogs can smell on our breath. But to make sure that you understand how amazing this is, the odour is 1 part per trillion. So for us mere humans, it's the equivalent of us smelling 1 teaspoon of sugar in 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water. So what makes a dog's sense of smell so good? The percentage of a dog's brain that's devoted to analysing smells is 40 times that of a human. So everything about a dog's nose is designed to give them the superpower, and we find that really exciting. So back to canine medical detection. We're a registered charitable trust. We do have a full scientific and clinical support team. Our training and headquarters are here in Dunedin. And just so that there's no misunderstanding for people, our dogs do not go out into the public to sniff people. So all the detection is completed in our centre from supplied samples, and we use specialised scent detection equipment to hold those samples. So for our training, the samples are grown in a laboratory at various concentration ratios, and this is all part of our training process. So each cancer has its own signature odour, and the dogs are smelling the volatiles that are released from those cancer cells. Now, healthy cells also release volatiles, and we teach the dogs to ignore this odour, and this is one of our controls, our negatives. So we also teach the dogs to ignore contaminants. This could be high blood pressure, medication, antidepressants. You know, perhaps you had asparagus for dinner the night before. So we train our dogs for the widest parameters possible, and we continue with this training and testing until we've got sufficient data to show that the test has a high diagnostic accuracy and a better accuracy than any existing tests. So once we have this data, this then confirms the validity for a national urine test for ovarian cancer by our medical detection dogs. So everything that we do is recorded. The data goes into a specialised software program. The training is video recorded. So there is absolutely nothing left to chance, and all our work is peer reviewed. So canine medical detection, we have the expertise and the infrastructure in New Zealand to train dogs, and they are there to assist the clinical professionals in their decision making. We are just simply there adding another tool in the toolbox in the fight against cancer. So on behalf of all the medical detection, canine medical detection team, we want to say a massive thank you to Rural Women for supporting us in the training of our dogs for the early detection of ovarian cancer. And it's something that we are all very, very passionate about. So that's from me. Back to you, Angela.
Thank you very much, Pauline. It's fascinating. I mean, you know, I, for one, you know, have grown up with hunting dogs in our farm family, and know for sure, if anybody has a Labrador, that their nose is the thing. So I didn't know they had that many receptors. That's amazing, and that's in a German Shepherd. So thank you very much for that, Pauline. And let's see, you know, what we can, anything that we can discuss here to be able to further support you. So we have a question. It's actually from Gill, but Pauline, you might answer this. And if it is for you, Pauline, how long does a sample stay viable?
So that's part of our training process, is that the samples are made clinically, so we know exactly what they are. And part of that training, we work at 100% concentration ratio, and we go right down to 5%. And once we have all the data, then we start in on all those other aspects of exactly what you've asked, Jill. How long does it stay? And that's part of that process that we need to get to when we're talking down the track about patient samples, because the last thing we want is for a sample to be given and it's popped on the countertop and left in the sun for the afternoon, and then it's sent away. So it's all of those aspects that we need to work through.
I've got a question for Tash and Jane. Two questions here. Why is it diagnosed late or not at all?
Should I go first? So part of the problem with the reason why it's diagnosed so late is that women don't know the symptoms. So about 9 in 10 women have symptoms when their cancer's early, but what happens is they don't know, no one's telling them that they need to worry about it. No one's telling them that, oh, if you start noticing that you need to go pee in the middle of the night, or you can't eat as much and are feeling full, that actually those can be quite serious things, because they don't sound like things that could kill you. And so partly women wait, and about 1/3 of women have symptoms with their cancer growing for 6 months before they tell a doctor about it. So that's why the work that we're doing and Talkpeach is doing is so important to educate women. But there's also this massive issue at the GP level, and Talkpeach and Cure Our Ovarian Cancer are working at a government level to try and help fix that, because when someone tells their doctor, at the moment New Zealand doesn't actually have any national standards, so there's no that someone presents with these symptoms, you do this test. So unlike Australia and the UK and other places, so what happens is that women have to go back again and again, on average 4 times. So actually 1 in 5 women see their doctor for a year before they're given the blood test and ultrasound that can diagnose their cancer. So there's certainly, we need, you know, if we have a screening test to find that we can do on the whole population, then that would be helpful. But actually, I think the bigger issue is the fact that, you know, we have these symptoms. It would be like if people had a mole growing on their skin and the doctors were, you know, and we weren't telling people that a changing mole was a problem, and then people had to go to their doctor and their doctor was like, no, we don't cut that out, we don't do anything, it's probably just that time of month, or you're getting menopause. And then it had to grow to the point that it covered their whole face before anyone was like, oh, okay, maybe we will test this. Yeah, so there's huge issues with ovarian cancer and a lot of things that are wrong. And then once people get diagnosed at stages that would be considered early by other cancers with screening tests, there aren't good treatments. So women still have really poor survival rates with that. So it's really a combination of awareness, testing, finding better treatments, and the screening test. And you can't solve the problem just by looking at one area. Tash, do you want to add to that?
Just to add to that, in terms of having it detected, there is, if you did go to the doctor and they thought something was wrong, I mean, actually, no, not every doctor will do this, but if it did get to when it does get to the point, you will be sent for a transvaginal ultrasound and a CA125 blood test, which tests for a certain protein that has higher levels in your body when you do have ovarian cancer. And I think the statistic for that is it can find up to 90, am I correct, Jane? 98% of ovarian cancers, those two combined would find. However, you can't be diagnosed with ovarian cancer until it's removed and biopsied, but that's the way it would be detected. It's just not used as a screening tool, but it is a way to detect it.
Yeah, so screening tools are tools that you test people without any symptoms or signs of a disease. And so that would be, I presume with Pauline, that would be having everyone give a urine sample at a regular interval to see whether they can find cancer in that method.
Bowel screening or cervical screening.
Yeah. Whereas I guess where Tash and I are putting a lot of emphasis is trying to tell women about the symptoms so that women can recognise their ovarian cancer early, and educating doctors so the doctors can recognise that they should be testing to find it.
Yeah. So I've got further 2 questions, but because you've brought up the symptoms one, can you explain to us what the symptoms are? What we need to look for? You
need to look for persistent bloating. So that's not bloating that would come and go. And all these are, if you've had these symptoms for 2 weeks, that's when we'd recommend that you go and seek medical advice. So persistent bloating, as Jane said before, an urgency or needing to pee frequently. A kind of strange symptom is that one where it's like you're having trouble eating, or you're finding your appetite isn't as robust as it usually would be. There's also a change in bowel habits, so constipation, diarrhea, or painful bowel movements is a common one. That's one that I had. There's also Fatigue, which I guess, I mean, some of these are going to come across and everyone's like, I have that, but fatigue is another big one. And indigestion I've covered, persistent bloating, frequency to pee, pain during sex, and lower back pain are also symptoms attributed to it. And yeah, just general abdominal discomfort and pain also. Did I leave anything out there, Jane?
No, I think you got it all, and I've just shared the link to the attendees as well. Talkpeach have a really nice video where Tash and some other prominent New Zealanders run through the symptoms too.
Thank you.
So my question further to what you were saying before is, so when you're talking to the medical teams or health systems, what are they saying when you say, we've got an issue here, people? What's their response?
I think a lot of the time we've faced it, Jane, that when we've talked about pathways to testing, it always comes back to money, I guess, and that, you know, it's going to take money and it's complicated, and doctors are like, well, we're scared to send people off to get an ultrasound and this and that, because if it's not the norm, you know, I guess they're worried their end that, you know, that it comes down to money. So there's that. But yeah, I think that's a roadblock that we've definitely come across quite a bit.
It is tricky. There are some doctors who are doing an amazing job, and actually about one in 5 women get diagnosed within a month of seeing their doctor, which is fantastic. So there are some doctors out there who do everything right, but then the other side, you've got 1 in 4 who see a doctor for a year or longer before they get diagnosed. So part of the issue is that we don't have national standards, and so it's up to an individual doctor to decide what to do, and the DHBs are always looking to save money. So if there's not so the symptoms, you know, the symptoms are pretty common, and that, you know, people from time to time can have some of these symptoms, and it is really important that they get checked out and we rule ovarian cancer out early to find it, rather than waiting until it becomes so obvious that it's definitely ovarian cancer. But part of the issue with that is then you'll also be doing some tests on people that don't have ovarian cancer, and the rate of finding ovarian cancer if women have symptoms is about the same as finding breast cancer with the mammogram screening program. So, you know, we think that rate's acceptable for breast cancer, and the cost of the tests are about the same as the mammogram screening program as well. But for some reason, it hasn't been acceptable for ovarian cancer. And so I think it's about changing the perception and changing the standard of care and getting the government to realise that this is an important issue, because the Ministry of Health don't even put it on their consumer cancer section of their website. Neither does the Cancer Control Agency, despite it being such an important issue. So there are certainly doctors out there who are really trying their hardest and doing great. There are doctors who are just, you know, they have to learn so much about everything, and it's hard to do a good job all the time and know 100% of everything. So I think it's important to make it really easy for them and to have these standardized guidelines to make sure that the DHBs do fund the tests, and to have it consistent throughout the whole country.
Which is one of the goals in the petition.
And so, Pauline, what are your thoughts on that bit? Because you would have, I imagine that you would have some interesting conversations with health professionals about what you're doing.
The health professionals that we've spoken with simply cannot wait. They understand that it takes a long time for us to ensure that we've got all the data. There's a big difference between testing and screening, but as we're all saying, it's all about early detection. And the thing for us is what we're wanting to do is to prioritise patients. So as you know, Jane and Tash have talked about the cost within the health system. So, you know, GPs, some will say yes and some will hold off. And behind the scenes is always the cost. So what we're saying is that this is a very cheap easy way of going about it. And the doctors are saying, if they can actually say, well, look, I'm sorry, you either don't fit the age demographic or you don't have all of the symptoms. You might have one or two, but it could be something else, you know. So no, we're not going to order this expensive diagnostic test. But if you like, we can actually just get a quick, easy, simple urine test. And then for us, that means that that person, those results go back to the GP, and then you prioritise and you can say, actually, well, yes, this has been picked up, so we're going to get onto this straight away and get things underway. So it's assisting the health system, if you like, without any extra burden on the cost. And it's all about early detection. That's what it is. And what we found with talking internationally was that what was happening was that the dogs were picking it up and they were giving a positive alert, and then that would go to back to the lab and they would say, no, the dog's wrong, you're fine. In actual fact, the dog was picking it up earlier than what they could at the lab. So that just shows their diagnostic accuracy. Here, the people that I've spoken with said, look, that would not happen in New Zealand. That person would go on a watch list and we would follow up next month, and keep checking and do whatever we have to do. So yes, the feedback from all of the medical professionals that we work with, that we speak to, is absolutely bring it on.
Great. So I have another question here for you from the Q&A, Pauline. How many dogs have been passed as field ready, if any, and how long does it take to train them?
They're validation and operational as opposed to field, but you know, it's a rural woman, so that's not a problem. So we allow up to 3 years to train the dogs and to get them what we call ready for that, and they're not ready until the biostatistician has analysed all the data and that's gone through. I mean, our clinical team, we have all the gists round the table. We have the oncologist, the pathologist, the urologist, the hematologist. So they're all there guiding us and talking to us and helping, and we're saying this is where we're at and this is what we're doing. So it's like going to university. You know, you're not going to walk out with a degree in 6 months. So we make sure that we say we allow 3 years. It could be earlier than that. As everybody knows, the dogs are all different. They all go through separate validation stages as we move forward. But yes, that's what we allow. But if you think, like we're doing the bowel cancer at the moment, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it takes up to 10 years for a person to be qualified to do colonoscopies. So if we can have dogs out within 3 years that are doing, you know, getting a result and getting that diagnostic opportunity, then it's well worth it.
Well done. I've got a couple of questions here for you.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
I've always been a cat person. I'm going to be a dog person now. Well, I'm now a dog person.
I gave a presentation yesterday and it was under the 100 and we were all social distancing. But do you know the number of stories, and I hear this all the time, of people that have come up and said, look, we've just got this pet dog and it just came up and it just kept nudging my breast all the time and wouldn't leave me alone. And then, you know, yes, they end up with breast cancer. Another one where a person, they were sitting on the couch watching TV and a little dog would hop up on the back of the couch and would be licking the back of her husband's neck. And they thought it was cute. You know, this little dog was licking away. Within 3 months, he had died of a brain tumour exactly where that dog was licking. I mean, these are pet dogs, and we hear this story again and again and again. So, you know, ours are working dogs, which rural people understand. You know, they wake up in the morning ready to work. They ready to work in the afternoon. They have something to eat. They have something to sleep. And 7 o'clock at night, they say, yeah, if you want, you know, those 2,000 merinos out the back shifted, I'm good to go. So that's what we look for within our dogs as well. They're high drive energy dogs that just want to work, and they love to work.
That's great. And it's quite funny though, isn't it? Because I saw an article recently that actually dogs are not man's best friend, they're women's best friend. So, you know, this could be how some of the language we could use. But I do have a couple of questions that Jane and Tash and even Gill might be able to answer. Do we think women GPs might be better at this in referring, or, you know, is it across the board?
Well, I actually had a female GP that ignored my symptoms for 2 years and told me she didn't want to worry me and didn't test me. So part of the problem, I think, is that we've had a male GP and doctor environment for so long, and that's dictated the medical education. It was only 2000 that they did research to show that women with ovarian cancer actually had symptoms, because apparently all the women with ovarian cancer who told their doctors about symptoms didn't know what they were talking about. And you can imagine, you know, would that happen with prostate cancer, that it would take, you know, until 2000 for people to say, well, actually, I couldn't eat as much before I was diagnosed. Oh, that just happens to men, you know? So I think, yeah, I think there are lots of problems, and it's not just the gender of the doctor. But Tash, her doctor did tell her to go to the emergency department. What gender was your doctor, Tash?
He was male.
Yeah, so
yeah, so he was the one he rang the hospital actually and said he wanted to send me in, and then I went in. It was a female that sent me home. And then he was like, you go back that, and I did. I just kept taking myself back. Yeah. So
okay,
I think to me it sounds like it's not so much what gender your doctor is, it's just the level of awareness that they actually have. And I mean, to be fair, there is an awful lot of awareness that they need to have to even practice as a GP. We need to bear that in mind as well. But just the whole campaign, you look at how successful, as you say, like prostate cancer and the breast cancer awareness campaigns have been, and we just need to get out there and do this with these cancers.
Yeah. And I think it is about the more people out there doing it, you know, the louder the voice becomes, and the more people are talking and can advocate for themselves confidently at the GP, you know, that then spreads out further through the GP as well.
Yeah, and it's so important that women do persist if they feel that something isn't right, because it's actually really common for GPs to misdiagnose women. About 8 in 10 get misdiagnosed initially. So if they're not testing to rule ovarian cancer out, it is really easy to miss. And the tests, you know, for all that the health systems say that they're too expensive, we're trying to persuade them that they're not, because the blood test actually costs $20 and the ultrasound costs $200. And you think, in terms of the amount that the public health system has to pay for those actual physical doctor's visits, sending people to the doctor 5 times, you know, they're paying more for the person to visit the doctor 5 times to the doctor's hands than they would if they just did the test in the first instance. So, yeah.
And I think it's, you know, your body best, and you know when something doesn't feel right. It's about reaching out to me or Jane if you are ever feeling, and we will 100% back you and give you that confidence to go, you know. It's about going, no, this is actually different for me, I need some answers, and pushing forward with it.
No, very good. So is there an example of a country who's doing a great job? I did hear you, I think Jane mentioned some, and what are they doing, you know, and what could we pick up from what they're doing that we could push for here or do well here in New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Zealand?
Do you want to go, Tash, or do you want me to?
Were you going to talk about government funding in Australia?
Yeah.
I'll let Jane do that because she's better with figures.
Okay, I'm the scientist, Tash is the educator, so we work quite well together, and it's certainly as women, you know, diagnosed with this awful disease, going through everything, it's really good to have someone else on our side who understands all the issues. So in Australia, so to answer your question, there's no one that's doing it really perfectly. So there's no country that has an amazing funded awareness campaign where every woman knows the symptoms, and where every GP knows to send people for tests, but there are certainly countries that are doing a lot better job than New Zealand. And so Australia has put a lot of funding into ovarian cancer. Their Prime Minister, just a few days ago, spoke to the entire country about the importance of ovarian cancer. It's never been mentioned at a government level in New Zealand. So they have put about, off the top of my head, I think it's 15 million into dedicated ovarian cancer research, and then another
20 million into research.
There we go. And then another 15 million into gynecological clinical trials to give women access to the best treatments available. They fund 3 more treatments than New Zealand does too. And they have it on them, they have it on their health websites, they have some promotion, and they have GP guidelines as well to ensure testing. And their survival rate, so for every year, it's about 180 women who die of ovarian cancer in New Zealand, and about 10 of them would be alive still if they lived in Australia. But, you know, we think they could be doing a better job. We think New Zealand could be. As Tash said, you know, when a woman goes for a smear test, you know, you see the whole population. The nurses spend a lot of time with people. If people were just telling women and using that opportunity to tell them about the symptoms, you know, then you've educated the whole country, and that's a very cheap thing to do. So there are lots of, really simple things that the government could be doing that would actually make a huge difference. And that's, I think, some of the really frustrating things. I know Tash probably felt like this when she had to go back to the doctor. I definitely do. I'm dying of cancer because my doctors had never heard of ovarian cancer. I'm dying of ovarian cancer because I'd never heard of it. And I want to make sure that while I'm still healthy enough to keep fighting, that I'll fight my hardest with Tash to drive change, because it's not as hard as it should be. It's because it's a woman's cancer and it hasn't had the attention that it deserves that we give to other cancers that the survival is so poor.
And I think this year, if there were huge, if there were just a lot more people talking and driving that awareness, just getting our voice louder, we'll be able to do so much. I mean, I feel like me and Jane have done so much with hardly any other manpower. I've seen since I first got diagnosed years ago to now, when there was nothing, and I look at it, because it's often me and Jane don't look back because we're always looking ahead. We've got to get this done. We've got to get this done. But it is those rare times when you reflect and it's like, oh my God, we've actually created a ripple, and it hasn't just been nothing. And I'm just like, we've done that, just the two of us, and with everyone else banding in, I just know that the change could be monumental.
Yeah, and I imagine Tash will have this, because we do as well. Like, we get women who contact us and say that they've seen the awareness material that we've put out, and they went and saw the doctor and they got tested and they had ovarian cancer, and it was caught at stage 1, where they can surgically get rid of it, the only stage that actually has good treatment. And they're okay. They don't have to repeat my story because of what our organisations have done. So.
And when me and Jane are having a moment, we're on the phone together sometimes, we always say that. We're like, remember that week when someone got diagnosed early, it's like, we have saved lives, and that's what we have to keep reminding, because ultimately this is about lives. It's about saving lives and saving whānau across our country the heartbreak of a late stage diagnosis, really. Yeah,
that is absolute magic. But I do have a question around that. So when you've talked to officials about the need to have it, for instance, on the website, to have our Prime Minister say something nationally, what's the reaction? And what therefore can we, I know what we can do. I want to hear what your thoughts are around that.
The petition is getting handed over this month, we hope, COVID depending. But last time me and Jane spoke, the whole room was crying, and that's when they were like, MPs were saying, you have to put this petition in, So that's what drove it. We haven't really got to the stage yet where they've actioned anything. I know the National Party said if we get in, we're doing this, that, the other. But we haven't actually got a commitment from anyone yet. But I think we've got in the door. We've got in the door twice, and we're about to get in the door a third time. And I don't know, I just feel positive. Like I think it's changes afoot, and it'll definitely make a huge difference if we can get more people to sign that petition and just more people talking, really, because it's the voices of the community when they're loud is what drives government change. You know, the more people there are making that noise, the more likely they are to do something.
Yeah. So tell us more about the petition, and I'll put the link in the chat again, but tell us more about the petition.
So we've got a petition running to Parliament, and as Tash said, I think the more publicity we can get around ovarian cancer, the easier it is to force the politicians to act on this. And so we're advocating for funding for awareness, we're advocating for education for the doctors, to make it easier to get tested, to fund the treatments that Australia funds that we don't fund, and for clinical trial funding and research funding for ovarian cancer. And we're going for it all because we don't have the time to wait, because all these women are dying and all the areas are really important. And so we have this petition. We're trying to get as many signatures as possible. As Tash said, government listens to the collective voice, and it is really hard because Tash and I are really the main voices speaking about this cancer in New Zealand. But we're working our hardest, and we need other people to come on board, because as Tash said, you know, ovarian cancer women, we don't live long enough to form an army en masse to protest this. We need the public, we need people like you to come on board and support it too, and say that actually this is an issue that's really important to women, it's really important to New Zealanders, and we need to act on it now.
And we're also going with them. We realise we don't want it to seem diluted when they take it on. So we do have a clear action plan that when this gets handed over, to set a date to meet with the Health Committee. And that's when we want to talk through, which we've met, each of our goals and our steps that we think would need to be taken to making them happen. Obviously, we've ranked things that we think of importance because we know we can't get it all done at once, but I definitely think it's important to show them the breadth of what is needed to be done. But we do have a smaller goal, smaller bite-sized chunk for them to take on when we do meet them. So that it's more digestible, I'd say. And then we work towards the other things as we go. Would you say that's right, Jane?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So I'm just coming, there's more of a comment in the Q&A, and I guess this is particular to rural women, is around the strength that we have in ourselves, that sometimes we just want to soldier on. And so if we're feeling a little bloated, oh well, you know, there are still things to do. And, you know, the story is about her mum going to the pharmacist because she has short of breath, but you know, she was busy because, you know, her father had died, and you know, mum was carrying on doing the farming. So of course she was stage 4 with you know, ovarian cancer. It says drew out the fluid from around the lungs and found the cancer cells and traced them back to ovarian. So you know, it is really important, isn't it, to actually we don't really do, we can soldier on, but we actually need to soldier our way to the GP, and we need to soldier that conversation that we have with our GP, don't we, to ensure that we are taken care of or listened to.
Yeah, and that's so important, because the symptoms, and that's why it's so important for women to know the symptoms, because they're not, you know, I tramped the Milford Sound before I was diagnosed the Milford track. You know, I was getting up at 6:30 to go to the gym, I was working full time, I was doing my master's part-time, and I felt tired, but you know, that's kind of understandable. And it is really easy to just say, oh no, it'll be, but it's really important if something doesn't feel right to tell your doctor and get ovarian cancer ruled out, because you know, the worst case scenario for that is you don't have cancer. Great. The best case scenario is you catch it earlier, and that can give you a lot more time. And yeah, it's really important to empower women to have that information. So the work that Talkpeach is doing and we're doing, is so important in that regards.
Now, we have got to we've got to the end of 3 o'clock. In fact, we've gone over a little bit of time, so you know, don't tell anybody, I'm really not that good at timekeeping. Gill, is there anything you would like to say in closing, or Pauline, Tash and Jane, you know, something quick to say in closing? And Gill, would you like to say something in closing after they have spoken? Just very quickly, Tash or Jane, and then Pauline.
I guess I'd just like to say thank you, everyone, for coming and listening. And yeah, we would really appreciate you to sign the petition and learn the signs and symptoms and share them, and contact us at any time if you need any help with anything you want. We've got resources that you can use. We've got info. I mean, we're out here driving where we can support in any way. And top of it is to always put your health first. If you notice anything different for you, go to your GP. And if symptoms persist, go back. And if they don't listen to you, go to someone else. But yeah, you've got to put yourself first, because you can't look after anyone else if you're not well enough to look after them.
Yeah, I think Tash just summed that up perfectly.
So back to my dogs, as always, dogs don't judge. As we know, cancer has no respect for age, race, geographical boundaries, financial status. So as we talked about before, it's up to women. We know our bodies, and the sad thing is when we actually have to advocate so strongly at a time when we need support rather than feeling that we're going into battle. So the one good thing that we feel, and we keep saying with using dogs as a diagnostic tool, is they have the potential to save lives, and will that life be yours? So so thank you to Rural Women, and yeah, I really look forward to working together with everyone.
Kia ora.
Okay, my turn. Wow, what a powerful hour that has been. Tash and Jane, your stories are absolutely incredible, and you guys have so much courage. My goodness. So yeah, strengthen. The strength that you guys show is amazing. Support. We're here to support you and support getting your message out. And connect. We'll connect with whoever we can to help you do that. And Pauline, thank you so much. Your work with the dogs is so.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks Tash, thanks Jane, thanks Pauline, and thanks Gill. We're all spread around the country, and thank you to all of you who have attended. We are recording this. We will put the recording up on our website, so feel free to share. You will hear more from us. I know that you know, Rural Women New Zealand will have some work to do around what we can do for you for this campaign and for women. And so you'll hear more from us. But thank you so much for joining. Kia ora tātou. Thank you.